Okay, so let's get started. Well, we'd like to thank APAC for the invitation in the first place and congratulate you on the program and the impeccable organization. So our session is going to be divided in two parts. First, we are going to be introducing the mediation rating scales we have been working on and the latest version, which is the one that we are currently using. And then in the second part, we are going to, well, we would like you to mark some tasks and use the rubrics to see, after we have described them, to see how you are able to use them. Yeah, it's going to be a very fast sort of training, but we hope that you will provide us with some feedback about how they work. There are two handouts that we're going to be sharing with you on the chat. Maybe some of you could copy them and paste them later on again. And you will need them for the second part, yeah? One is that one has the tasks and the other are the rubrics that you will need to be checking so as to decide which is the mark that you would give for that specific performance. We have several samples that we have brought. But before we talk about mediation, maybe we should go over the concept of mediation a little bit. And also, if we're going to do that, there's no way we don't mention the CFR, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, Learning, Teaching, and Assessment. In 2001, well, it was a turning point for language teaching and learning. It really revolved around the concept of 4 modes of communication: reception, production, interaction, and mediation. Already in 2001, mediation was defined or was included in the CFR like this. So in both the receptive and productive modes, the written and or oral activities of mediation make communication possible between persons who are unable, for whatever reason, to communicate with each other directly. Translation or interpretation, a paraphrase, summary, or record provides for a third party a reformulation of a source text to which this third party does not have direct access. Mediating language activities, reprocessing an existing text, occupy an important place in the normal linguistic functioning of our societies. If you look at the parts we have highlighted, you will see that the main idea is manipulating, reprocessing, reformulating a text that is going to be used or is intended for a third party who does not have access to the information for a number of reasons. So this is the main idea of mediation of texts. And this happens when you mediate for somebody. But there are other types of mediation as well. Mediation could happen as well when you work collaboratively, when you work in groups. And in that case, we're talking about co-constructing meaning together. And it would be mediation with other people. And there is even a third possibility in which you act as an intermediate between people who don't understand each other, for maybe because there is a misunderstanding, cultural differences, or they don't speak the same language. So you can also mediate between people. In 2001, the CFR had not developed mediation to the same extent that they had developed the other modes of communication. That really happened with the publication of the companion volume in 2020. It is in the companion volume that mediation is really detailed, and different scales have been included, as well as an array of mediation activities. This is also, the publication of the companion volume is also relevant to us because after the publication, or even before the publication, already in 2017, there was a draft available, and this triggered a change in the curriculum of Official School of Languages, because the curriculum was updated and mediation was incorporated in our curriculum. So previously, our curriculum was organized around 4 skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then a 5th mode of communication in the new curriculum was included. So there would be 5 parts, and those same 5 parts would also exist in the exam. Right now, exams are divided into 5 papers, and each of them carry the same amount of marks, 20% for each part. As it is established right now, candidates sitting these exams, they need to reach 50% in each of the papers. So the result in one paper does not compensate the result in another. And the minimum overall score needs to be 65%. Therefore, it's not just a progressive incorporation of mediation. It is part of the exam. It is a 5th part. And if a candidate doesn't pass mediation, he or she won't be able to get their certificate. That's why it has become essential to us to really understand what mediation is and to really learn how to teach it and also evaluate it. This is a timeline of how mediation has been incorporated into the curriculum of Official School of Languages. So the publication of the new curriculum at the end of 2017, it was followed by the publication of another royal decree that detailed what exams needed to be like. So that happened approximately in a year. The very first time that mediation was included in exams was in 2019. But that was something provisional because we hadn't had the time to really create new rating scales, but it needed to be included. It is in 2020 when the implementation of mediation happened in full. And we, as a team, so Ángel, Antonio, as well as Teresa, Berceruelo, and myself, we have been working really hard in 2019 to have those new rating scales ready for 2020. And then after those 3 years, 2020, 2021, and 2022, when we already had like a rating scale for mediation, there was another change, more recent change, because the type of task in the exam changed as well. So for 3 years, we've had written mediation, and it's been in the exam call of 2023 that oral mediation was included. Therefore, we've had 3 rubrics so far. I'm going to be telling you about the first 2, but we are going to be really working with the last one. So initially, when we talk about the all written mediation rubrics, first of all, we are referring to this one. This was the first step. This was used in 2019. And it was just a temporary solution because we needed to have mediation in the exams. Well, the law established that we needed to have mediation. So this was the rubric that had been used until then. So mediation was basically included in the name of the rubric and also incorporated to coherence and cohesion. But it was done in such a way that it wouldn't really have too much, it wouldn't have really a big impact on the result of the candidate, because at this point we were still coming to terms with the concept of mediation and how we should be teaching and assessing it. So the real change came in 2020, and this is the first rating scale that was created specifically for that task. This is the one that we were working on for months. And I'm going to briefly describe how it is organized, because the one that we're going to be using later on, really, it's like an updated version of this rating scale. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, you will see that there are 4 categories. So there are 4 main categories, or macro criteria, as we've come to call them. which are task achievement, text organization, mediation strategies, and linguistic reformulation. So those are the four main categories, but there are criteria included in each of them. Yeah? And then there are different bands from 10 to 1 in which the descriptors are included for each of these categories in the first place, and then criteria. I'm now going to refer to the different criteria in each of these four categories. So in the first place, well, this is just a summary of the different groups that we have. So 4 categories, 14 criteria, and up to 70 descriptors. So each of those make up to 70. Now, the first category is task accomplishment. So what is taken into consideration here is that what is really what the candidate has transmitted from the source text, the input text the candidate has been given, into the mediated text. So besides this, it is whether the functional language that has been used is appropriate, and also the length of the text. At this point, we are not doing oral mediation, only written mediation. So whether the number of words that were required have been written, and if into the mediated text, there has been enough information that has been mediated, so the transmission of the information. The second category deals with how the text is organized. So the organization of ideas is one of the criterions, but also whether the type of text that the candidate was required to write is the one the candidate has written, if it's a note or an email, and the cohesion mechanisms that have been used. The third group, the third category, would have to do with mediation strategies. So we can have a really vast number of mediation tasks. Therefore, what is considered at this point is whether the mediation strategy that was needed here for this, specifically for that task, is the one the candidate has used, or even more than one mediation strategy. That's why we talk about the repertoire of mediation strategies used without specifying any in particular. So it could be paraphrasing or relaying or summarizing or selecting, and whether these strategies have been effective. And then the last category has to do with the language reformulation. So the language used to perform the mediation. What is really taken into consideration is the range and accuracy of the grammar and vocabulary used by the candidate, and whether the register used is appropriate. Very frequently, mediation tasks make it necessary for the mediator to change the register, because maybe it's a very formal or difficult or complex text that we have in the first place, but that needs to be mediated for somebody who needs to have it in more simple words. Therefore, register matters. Now, my colleague Antonio is going to continue, and he is going to tell you about the updated rating scale.
Okay, just a second. Continue with the presentation here. Okay, we're going to talk now about the new oral and written mediation rubrics. We decided to change the rubrics because, as Desi has just said, we decided, well, the authorities in Andalusia decided that we're going to introduce a new type of mediation task, which was an oral test. So far, we had only done written tasks. The problem with that was that the exams were extremely long. So students spent a lot of time there doing just the written exam, so the normal production and co-production, which was a written production and then an interaction. And then after that, they had to create another 2 tasks, written tests. And that made the exam extremely long. So we decided to first kind of integrate written mediation into the production task, and then create the new oral tasks. And to do that, we needed different rubrics. The ones that we had were not valid because they were just for mediation. So where we only had one, because that rubric that we've just seen was valid for all the levels and only for written mediation. Now we have, well, this is a new one. Okay, as you can see, is very similar to the one that we've just seen, but it's kind of more updated and more simplified version. Okay, so we wanted to facilitate, like make things easier for the correctors, the examiners, the teachers. So there's we're going to so we have now 6 rubrics, whereas before we only had 1. These 6 rubrics are 3 of them are oral for oral mediation, and the other 3 are for written mediation. And then we have them at 3 different levels. We have a rubric for basic level, which is A2, and we have another one for the intermediate level. It's for B1 and B2, and then we have another one for the advanced level, B1 and C2. In reality, they're very similar. It's not that they're totally different. The only difference in reality, apart from, well, there are some parts of text organization and fluency and in oral rubric, is the part of this mediation strategies where we actually specify the type of mediation that has to be evaluated in each level. So changes like whereas before in the old rubric we had 4 different criteria, now we only have 2. So we, as I said before, we wanted to make things easier. We have the task accomplishment. That doesn't change. It's what and how much of the information from the source text has been transmitted by the student. Then the mediation strategies, how that information is transmitted. And as I said before, here we specify the type of mediation that A2 candidates should use, and the ones that C2 candidate should use, and they're totally different. And then the other part of the language reformulation, we decided to get rid of them. Especially apart from wanting to make things easier, is a lot of the teachers, correctors, examiners were evaluating their, again, grammar mistakes, vocabulary mistakes, etc. And that is evaluated somewhere else in the other part of the writing part. And we didn't want them to penalize students here, whereas what they should be evaluating here is the use of strategies, how they mediate a text. So language reformulation part has been removed, and now we talk about language resources. They're part of the mediation strategies. And then the other part of text organization, or the fluency in the case of the oral mediation, they're integrated in the task accomplishment. As regards to marking, as you can see, just a second, if I can go back. Yeah. Okay, this is a rubric, as you can see, is very similar to the one that Desi presented earlier on. There are 2 parts, 2 criteria, task accomplishment and mediation strategies, and then you have different columns there. And each one, in each one, you can find the different descriptors for each criteria, and they're marked. Okay, it goes from 0, that is if the student does something totally different to what they should be doing, to 10. Okay, that means that the performance was extremely good. Never perfect, because at A2 level, for example, it can never be perfect. At C2 maybe, but not at A2 or B1. So the maximum points, or all the number of points that a student could have in each of the criteria is a 10. So they could get a 10 in the task accomplishment, for example, and a 10 in the mediation strategies. So, as there are 2 tasks, well, the maximum that the student could get in each of the tasks is 20 points. That means 10 for mediation strategies and 10 for task accomplishment. But there are 2 tasks. So students have to perform 2 tasks, oral mediation and written mediation. That means that they're going to be evaluated with 2 rubrics, and the maximum points that they could get is 40 points, 20 per task. And as each of the tasks has to be corrected by 2 examiners, okay, that's what our law says. So the maximum points a student could get if they get everything perfect is 80 points. That is a punctuation of the marking from the 2 different examiners. To be able to calculate the average, you need to get at least 50% of the marking. That means 40 points. And the minimum mark to certify would be 52 points, which correspond to 65%. We're going to see the changes now that have been produced in each of the criteria. We're going to start with the written mediation. In the criterion of task accomplishment, there are 3 descriptors. Whereas before there were 4, for example. You have the adjustment, that is what degree the goal, communicative goal, has been, which is required by the task, has been fulfilled, has been achieved. And we have the transmission of information, okay, if the relevant of information okay, has been transmitted, okay, the amount of relevant information transmitted. And then you have the organization of the text, how easily text can be read. Read because it's written mediation. Okay? That is the first of the micro criteria, the macro category. Then we have the other one, which is mediation strategies. Here we have 3 descriptors. We have the range and the effectiveness of the strategies that the student, the candidate, uses to extract the relevant information from the text. And then that's 2, range and effectiveness. Okay? And then the third one is the adequate use of their own language resources. But here we want to focus that it's their own language resources. Not, they cannot just copy from the source text and use that language. And also here we want to focus as well on the recipient of the message. Okay? So for example, in a C2 task, for example, if they're presented a text, a complex text, and they have to mediate that, make a summary or something, or make it understandable for someone who has a lower level of English, for example, the student would have to use the adequate language so that that student with that limited knowledge of the language can understand it. So here, as you can see, we are not evaluating the level of the language of the candidate, because that is evaluated somewhere else. Here we're seeing if that person is able to process the text so that another person can understand it. So that's why it has to be their own language resources, and those ones that are adequate for the task. Then in the oral mediation, it's very similar. The same 3 descriptors, or nearly the same. We have the adjustment. Again, we have the transmission of information. Here, instead of having the text organization, we have fluency in the oral transmission of the information, how easily the text can be followed instead of read. And in the language strategies, we find the same 3 descriptors, the range and effectiveness of the strategies, and then the adequate use of their own language resources. So here, the difference, as we said before, is that here we specify the type of mediation at each level. And well, just when we're talking about language resources, okay, especially in the oral mediation, we're talking about not only linguistic resources, which would be kind of a phonetic or lexical or morphosyntactical. Those are the ones that one would think of when you think of language resources, but also other types of resources like paralinguistic resources. We also have to take into account when performing the task, the oral task especially, the phonic qualities like the tone, the pitch, the intensity of the sound, etc. Because sometimes they determine the meanings of. It's not the same saying "they've arrived" kind of in a surprised way than saying "they've arrived" in a kind of annoyed way. Okay? So that is giving us a lot of information. Okay? Also, other types of indicators like emotional reactions, etc., like crying, laughter, etc., or other elements like onomatopoeias, etc., or pauses and silences that a lot of times, other times, they're very meaningful as well. And then apart from that, we also have the extra linguistic resources. Okay, like here we refer mostly to non-verbal language, because they support, they intensify a lot of the times, and they also contradict sometimes what someone is saying. Okay? We talk about gestures or our movements, etc. So here now we're going to explain more or less, okay, because we're going to need that. We're going to repeat this later again. But you need, for the second part, to know how to use the rubrics. So we've already explained that there are two categories, task achievement and the mediation strategies. Okay? As you can see that there are different criteria. You have the adjustment to the instructions, selection and transmission of the information, organization of the information, etc. And then you have different descriptors. Okay? As you can see here, it goes from 0 to 10. And you have the same descriptors, they're very similar, but they're at different levels. Okay? The column in the middle, the one that says 6.5, that marks kind of the average level. Okay? So if we're examining a B1 student, B1 would be the middle column. One that marks the certifying mark. Okay? 6.5. So that is the middle, the average student. And from then you go upwards or downwards. So what we kind of recommend is that first kind of you read the task, or when you're hearing the students or the candidate talking, okay, you kind of more or less, you'll know more or less where to go, where to go to, more towards 0 or 1 or towards 10. Okay? We kind of recommend that you start in the middle column, which is kind of the average student, and then from there you go upwards or downwards. Okay? So to kind of to be able to kind of specify more, okay, their level. Even if you more or less have heard the student for a while, you know where to go, okay? And we actually have to focus on 2 of those columns, okay? If I think that the student has kind of 6.5 level, but it could be more towards 4 or more towards 8, okay? So then we start kind of hearing and making decisions, and then we might start then taking different descriptors. Okay? In the end, we'll see, okay, for example, if in the task achievement criterion, we've marked 2 of the descriptors in number 4 and 1 in number 6.5, okay, and we have to now decide whether to put a 4 or a 5, which is kind of the middle mark. Okay, so as there are uneven numbers, you either get 3 or 2 and 1. Okay, So there's no other way of marking them. Okay. So if all of them are 4, so you know the mark is in that criterion is a number 4. Okay, is a 4. If there's 2 and 4 and 1 and 6 and 5, you could decide whether to put a 4 or a 5, which is the middle one. Okay. The same as in the other one, for example, the example that we put there, in the mediation strategies, we've decided that that student, his adequate, well, his range of linguistic strategies was adequate, but he had very largely effective use of mediation linguistic strategies, okay, and very largely appropriate use of grammar structures and vocabulary, for example. Okay, so in that case, we've marked 2 in the column of number 8 and 1 in 6.5. Okay, there we have to decide whether to put the 8 or the 7, which is the middle mark. Okay. So this is more or less the way, okay, that in which we mark or which we use marks. And now Ángel will continue with the next part of the presentation.
Okay. Okay. So we're moving. Where is it? We are now. The desktop here. Okay. So we just move to. Okay, are you just right? Okay. Hello? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. So now just my partners Antonio and Desi have been talking about the history of our rubrics and how to use them. And now we are going to do make an analysis of the language levels we can find in the rubrics. That's just why we have decided to have 3 rubrics instead of 1. So we're going to range from the levels A2 to the level C2. The first question is why differentiate levels in mediation? And it's obvious that not all mediation tasks can be suitable for each of the language levels. So it is very important to adapt our rubrics to the CFR language levels. We can do that by describing accurately the different ways that the information can be transmitted, and by analyzing the different mediation strategies that can be used at each language level. For us, it's also very important as the rubric designers to propose different mediation tasks that could be appropriate for each of the language levels, so that our teachers can design task designers can design tasks appropriate for each level, and teachers can teach them in class. Right. So we will start with the first of our criteria, which is the selection and transmission of information. And we can say that, for example, candidates at A2 level, they can only deal with very simple communicative situations, and they have very little information that they can process. And they can select only very specific details and with few options to choose, things like dates or times or prices, etc. In terms of transmission, they can transmit very simple and clear information. And well, the level of the language level they can use is, well, obviously very simple sentences, and they cannot give any explanations to justify what they have selected, because they don't have enough language to be able to do it. As for candidates at B1 and B2 levels, they have more capacity to select the data, and they can transmit the data with a higher level of complexity. B1 students can use simple sentences, and sometimes they can attempt using compound and complex sentences, while B2 students can use all kinds of sentences already, but still they're not able to produce cohesive texts yet. At this point, they are able to use reasoning to justify their ideas, okay? If we move to candidates at C1 and C2 levels, we can say that these candidates can select very precise information from the source text. And also they can transmit that information with a high level of complexity and precision. At this time or at this level, they must produce texts, okay, which can be fully cohesive in C1. And at C2, they should show some sensitivity towards the mediated person. Also at this level, students or candidates must use reasoning to justify the idea they transmit, and they produce complex arguments to support what they think. Also, candidates at C1 and C2 levels can interpret the information from the source text. So they should be able to explain non-visible aspects of it, like, for example, connotations and words and expressions, or the text irony and pragmatics, for example, and even explaining hidden messages and meanings. And they have to do it by using a cultural perspective. And so they can be able to manage concepts that must have been learned after a very close contact with L2 and its culture. So we move to the second of our criteria, which is the mediation strategies. At A2 level, candidates can simply amplify outlines and images, but in a very simple way. And they have a limited language level to express, to express their ideas or their descriptions. At B1 and B2 levels, they are able to amplify outlines and images in a simple way in the case of B1 candidates, and in a bit more complex way in the case of B2 candidates. Particularly at B2, not so much at B1, but at B2, they are able to summarize the text basic ideas, although they are not probably able to make a synthesis of the information from a text. They can make assumptions from what they see. For example, while describing a picture, they are able to make deductions about what's going on in the picture, or about what is going to happen, or etc., right? And they can give some reasons to justify the ideas they transmit, although these reasons may not be well-founded yet. The differences between B1 and B2 level is mainly in the degree of precision and the range of resources and the efficiency when they perform the mediation. At C1 and C2 levels, candidates are supposed to use synthesis and explanation as two mediation strategies, in addition to the ones of selection and amplification, which were mainly used in the levels of A2, B1, and B2. When we talk about synthesis, what we mean is that candidates are able to make a selection and personal combination of the text-relevant ideas to facilitate the mediated person its understanding. And when we talk about explanation, we mean the interpretation of the text information, for example, interpreting data from a graph, or word connotations, double meanings, hidden messages, explaining the social and cultural concepts that appear or are shown in the image or in the infographics, and the irony or the humor of the text. And well, just after this analysis, we will propose some tasks for each level, so that, as we said, to facilitate our teachers and facilitate our task designers some ideas about how to make them, to prepare them. At A2 level, the tasks are supposed to show clear communicative, very clear communicative situations, and they require a direct transmission of the relevant information. And text must be very short and very simple. And we can give some examples. For example, in written mediation, the candidates should be able to transmit very specific information, just like things like dates, times, prices, numbers, etc., addresses, something like that. For example, one of the candidates should tell their partner to some information because they want to go to watch a film or a play. So they are expected to transmit ticket prices or session hours of the film or the play. Or if we just talk about going to a restaurant, well, just transmitting opening times, menu prices, address, something like that. As for the oral mediation examples at A2, as they have a very simple and limited level of language, but I think it could be interesting to have the picture description as an example of oral mediation. There, students or candidates can simply locate the different elements of the picture, describe the people and objects that appear in it, or explain the actions that people are doing. Very simple things. This could be an example of an A2 mediation that's describing a scene in a park. Mediation should include a communicative situation, which could be very interesting for examiners to decide whether the action have been completed or the task had been achieved. In this case, you had to send an oral WhatsApp voice message. And well, the situation is you and your sister, when you were a child, used to go to a park near your house. And well, now your sister is away and you're chatting with her while sitting at the same park. So she asks you to share the scene. As mediation here, you tell your sister what's going on and what you are seeing, right? What you are watching in this moment. So we move to B1 and B2 level. The task here should include some communicative situation that makes candidate decide which information is relevant and which is not. And the text obviously should be more complex than in B1 and A2, sorry. But in this case, it should also include non-relevant information so that candidate must decide what is relevant to the situation and what information should transmit according to the situation given and which is not. So, and that will be also taken into account when marking the task achievement. So examples of written and oral mediation, because they can be used for both kind of mediation. For example, we'll be choosing the most appropriate holiday destination for a friend among several options, right? They have different options, and your friend wants to go to one English course in London, and then you have to choose only the one that really suits your friend's situation. For example, having children, or he prefers going to a country area or to the city area. Also developing specific instructions or information from an outline or an image. And in this case, it would be interpreting, for example, the weather map, or using the map of the city to tell the way from one place to another, or extracting the information from some notes and explaining to the mediated person. And finally, it would just include also the description of an image, where the description should be more precise, obviously, than in A2, and it should include some sort of deductions and speculation about what's going on. Here we have an example of written mediation in B1, And in this case, the communicative situation is your sister and her 5-year-old son are planning to visit you in London for the weekend, okay? So you know she loves team sports but hates motorsports, and your nephew loves animals but hates traveling by bus. So you have to use the weekend line, the weekend guide there, and send her a WhatsApp voice suggesting activities they could do for Saturday and Sunday. Here, obviously, he should take into account, the candidate should take into account the situation that, for example, her sister loves loves team sport, or her nephew hates traveling by bus. And this is another example of a B1, in this case of weather forecast, where you have to interpret the weather forecast and transmit the information according to the situation that your friend is coming for the weekend, and you have to suggest some activities depending on the weather condition, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this could be an example of an oral mediation where you have to describe a picture. As I said, it's not only describing what they see, but also speculating about what's happening in the picture, or what's going to happen, so that the information can be more precise. And we moving to the C1 and C2 levels. A task difficulty at these levels is based on the complexity of the information to be processed, and on the high level of precision, richness, and accuracy that is required to do it. As written mediation examples, we propose summarizing or synthesizing the relevant information in a text, and explaining or developing specific instructions or information from an outline, an image, or a graph. This could be an example of a mediation. And then, well, you work for a company which ask you to train its workforce on tornado preparedness. And you have to extract the information from this document about how to prepare for tornadoes, and draft a memo with the 10 top priority measures, and to make an anti-tornado protocol. Or, for example, this one, where you have to explain your students the life cycle of solar assets, and you have to use the information from that infographics to develop and explain what you have to say about this topic. When we move to the oral mediation at C1 and C2 levels, as Antonio, I think he said somehow, the task difficulty here cannot be based on increasing the number of words, as we can do it, for example, in the written mediation, because mainly when they have to take the test, they can have only 5 minutes to prepare it. So if you increase the number of words, it would be impossible for them to process so many words in so little time. So we propose to have a different kind of activity. In this case is the description, explanation, and interpretation of an image, but from a social and cultural perspective. It may be the photo of a bar we saw before, but in this case, it is not only describing the image, which should be made in a very precise way, but also, explaining the importance, for example, of bars in Spain, how important it is to understand our way of life, the culture of having tapas or something like that, or el tardeo, for example, in many bars in many places in Spain. Also, they can just explain or interpret the image, which a very powerful message, social message, or cultural or political, or explain the humoristic message of a joke or a cartoon, or the message of the meaning of a proverb or quotation. This could be an example of oral mediation for C1, C2. You can see it's an image with a powerful message. And well, the situation is that your friend cannot understand what it means, so he asks you for some explanation, and you try to help him, sending a voice message, transmitting, explaining, and interpreting what it means. And this is another example where obviously here you have somebody or friend who does not understand the meaning of this cartoon, and well, you explain to your friend what the illustration means and what message it aims to convey. Okay. And well, I think that's my part. So we just move to the using of the mediation rating scales, and Antonio, I think, will take it back.
Sorry,
we do it now, or we'll stop?
Yeah, we have to stop for a break,
Yeah.
okay, and come back at 6:30. I'll be opening the room myself.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so
We'll be there a few minutes before then.
yeah, I'll try. I need to go to the loo, make a coffee.
Yeah, well.
So give me 10 minutes or so. Okay.
6:30 sounds perfect.
Exactly that.
Well,
Okay.
a little bit before, I guess, 20 past or something like that. I'll be there. So just
Okay.
give me 10 minutes. Okie dokie.
Great.
thank you very much, Antonio,
Thank you.
Desiree, and Angel, for a very interesting and inspiring presentation. It was absolutely fascinating for me. So thank you very much. I hope our viewers enjoy it as much as I did. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you in a little while. Thank you.
Bye.
See you now.
Bye-bye.
Thank
you so
much.